In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to install a third-party regulator into your Air Arms S410 or S510 rifle. I've been absolutely amazed at how many people around the world are actually taking the leap and installing regulators for themselves. After years of thought, I've decided that the advantages of fitting a regulator far outweigh the disadvantages, and after looking at my options, I decided to get myself a Robert Lane regulator for my Air Arms S510 Xtra, and that's what we're going to be installing today. Before we begin though, I want to remind you that by doing this you're probably going to lose your warranty for the gun, so choose carefully. Okay, I have disassembled the rifle, and that's obviously the very first step. I've let all the air out of the cylinder and I've separated the whole gun. I might show you how to do that in another video, but it's going to take way too long to show you now, so we'll do that some other time. But basically this is the Robert Lane regulator right over here, and this has got to fit a certain distance inside the air cylinder, and to get it the right distance we've got a spacer. Spacer fits over the back end of the regulator like this, and the regulator will butt up against this piece over here. But what needs to happen in order for this to get far enough down is we've got to cut a section of this air pot at a certain length, but you can't just cut it anywhere because this is also what holds the valve spring in place. So with the regulator for Air Arms rifles, you get this piece of paper, and it basically explains that you've got to cut the air pot behind the spring retaining step. If you cut it too far back, then the spring is just going to kind of bounce right out the end and the gun will be completely useless. And if you cut it too far, then the spacer is not going to be able to fit over here. This part cannot stick out the end, so we've got to get it just right. 18 millimeters from the end of this measuring pot. I've made a mark there, so that's where we're going to cut it. But before I do that, I've got to get it out here. So to get it out, there's a small Allen screw you got to turn, and you got to hold this thing in place, because if you don't hold it, it's going to pop out. So I'll just loosen this here, and there you go. See, there's some spring tension there, and this is basically what puts tension on the spring tension on the valve, so that when the hammer hits it, the valve can open. So we're going to take the spring out, and we're going to take the valve itself out, and we're going to put those two somewhere safe. And now that this is out, we can begin to work on it. Okay, I'm going to interfere here for a second because I actually forgot a very, very vital piece. This over here, don't know if you can see that, is your valve, okay? When the hammer strikes the valve, it pushes it out, obviously allowing air in, but then there has to be a valve return spring that pushes the valve back to where it is. Otherwise, your valve is just going to keep letting air out. Okay, so your valve return spring is a very vital part. This is the valve return spring that is in the Air Arms S510. This is your air pot that you've shortened, and the air pot basically holds the valve spring in place so that it can push the valve back to its original position once you've taken your shot. Now, the Lane regulator actually comes with the valve spring that's at a slightly higher tension, that's slightly stronger than the original S510 valve spring. And you have the option of installing this spring that comes with the regulator as part of the gun. And what that will do is it will lower your velocity slightly. All it does is it makes the valve close a little bit quicker. It'll lower your velocity to about 880 feet per second on full power in 22 caliber, while the original spring, because it's at a slightly lower tension, will keep the gun at about 918 feet per second. Okay, so I did tests, which you'll see in another video, with both of these valve springs. As I said, this one about 920 feet per second, this one about 880 feet per second. I've decided not to install the spring that comes with the Lane regulator. I've decided to keep the old one just because I kind of like the velocity at about 920 feet per second, and if I want to turn it down a little bit, I can always change the transfer port size. If you want to, however, your gun might have different results, then you can use the spring that comes with the Lane regulator. Alright, just want to clarify that. Cool. Once you've determined where to cut the air pot, take a piece of masking tape, stick it on and mark it with a pencil. In my gun, this is 18 millimeters from the back of the air pot, but it may be different depending on your gun.
There you go.
With the help of a friend of mine, Craig Moss, I'm going to use a lathe to do this job, but it's not a necessity. A hacksaw or a pipe cutter will give you exactly the same result. There you go, that's perfect. As long as that measuring pot is short enough to fit in the spacer, like this, without touching, then you're good. If it's too long and the spacer doesn't fit properly, then you got to shorten it. And if it's too short, then you might find that it's behind that step over there that retains the spring, and then it's pretty useless. Then the gun can't fire, so it's got to be the right length. Okay, the next step is to drill a tiny little breathing hole in the air cylinder, and most people freak out when they hear that you've got to drill through the air cylinder, but these air cylinders are not weakened at all by drilling a hole through them. These things are actually, as far as I know, the air arm cylinders are made to withstand 650 bar of pressure, or 600 bar, or somewhere around there. So they're not going to be weakened by drilling a hole, and the hole's not going to let any air out. If you take a look at the regulator over here, you'll see it's got these two O-rings, and what happens is when the regulator is installed in the gun, you see that the regulator has a small breathing hole there. The regulator has to be able to let air in and out, and there's no place inside the cylinder for it to actually breathe the air. So you've got to drill a hole, and then on this side of the O-rings, you've got the pressure that you fill the rifle to, and on this side you've got the regulated pressure, and in between you've got like a neutral pressure where the regulator is able to breathe. The tricky part though is being able to find the right part in the air cylinder to drill the hole, because if you drill it too far, or you drill it too far the other way, then you're just going to let all the air out of your rifle and it's going to be useless. You've got to make another plan. So I've found the length here that I need to drill the hole. It's at 66.5 millimeters. What I've done is, before I went ahead and found the spot where I needed to drill the hole, what I actually did was I screwed in this piece all the way so that I could find the part of the cylinder that's in line with the barrel, with the transfer port here, so that the hole is going to be directly beneath the barrel when I drill it. You don't want the hole underneath the stock, because then it can't breathe. So 66.5 millimeters down, we're going to drill the hole. And the awesome part about the Robert Lane regulators is when you buy a regulator kit, it actually includes a tiny little, it looks like a 1 millimeter drill bit that drills in. You don't want anything too big, obviously. So I thought, it's pretty cool that the drill bit's included. You probably didn't even need to include the drill bit. You could go out and buy one, but that just shows like the quality that you're dealing with here with these Robert Lane regulators. He obviously takes note of all the fine details and includes all the stuff you need, so that's pretty cool. Let's get this thing drilled. Now this part can be quite daunting if you've never done it before, but as long as your measurements are correct, you have nothing to fear. I decided to use a drill press for this step, but again, the fancy tools are not really necessary, and you'll manage just fine with your average electric drill. Just make sure that the drill bit doesn't slip around, because you don't want to scratch up that glossy surface on the cylinder. I can't stress enough how important this next step is. Apparently a lot of people fit their regulators and they find that the air is leaking afterwards, and they automatically think there's something wrong with the regulator. They blame the regulator, while in fact what's happening is that the inside of the cylinder is quite rough, and air is able to leak past the O-rings and out of the ventilation hole. So what you got to do is actually just polish out the inside of the cylinder so that air just cannot escape. A lot of cylinders on the outside are polished at the factory, but on the inside they're left a little bit rough. So Robert actually sent me a kit of a few really fine sandpapers and this green material. I don't know what this is, but it's
like a scouring pad.
Yeah, it's like a scouring pad. It's rough, but it's not rough enough to scratch up the inside, and that basically just smooths it out. So I've put a dowel stick in here, spin it around on the inside a few times, get it really smooth, and clean it out afterwards, and hopefully that'll mean that the air won't be able to escape. That's probably one of the biggest things I'm worrying about, to be honest, but I'm sure we'll get the job done here. One thing that's also very important is to make sure that there's no burr left on the inside where you've drilled your ventilation hole, because if there's a burr there, it can take a bite out of the O-ring, and that'll also mean that your air is going to escape. So you want to just make sure that the ventilation holes, there's no burr on the inside. We actually fitted a piece of synthetic material on the inside of the tube when we drilled it, so that there was pressure against the tube and nothing kind of bent outwards. It just cut off very finely, and because this drill press is moving down so slowly, we got a really clean hole. But if you're using a hand drill, it will probably be quite cut up, so you'll need to do this step very thoroughly. Okay, that's good. Let's take a look. I don't think we're going to get much smoother than that, eh? The next step is to apply some of the silicone that's actually supplied with the regulator kit as well. A little bit on the inside of the cylinder, a little bit on the O-rings of the regulator, and a tiny bit on the threads over here. You really don't want to overdo it. You don't want to put too much in there, because apparently what happens is it vaporizes if you put too much, and it affects your chronograph readings. That's what I was told. So Robert says some people email him and say something wrong with the regulator, I'm getting some crazy readings over the chronograph. What's happened is they put a little bit too much of this stuff in, and it's messed with their readings. So I'm gonna break open the corner here, put a tiny bit of this on my finger, spread it on the inside over here. I'm actually just going to first put some on the threads here, just a very little bit. It'll help seal things up quite nicely, keep it nice and smooth. Okay, what we need to do here now is to push the regulator up the cylinder to where it needs to be, and it's challenging because you've got to get it exactly the right distance up. So the regulator comes with very detailed instructions of what you need to do and the best way to do it. So what I've done is I've marked on a dowel how far I need to press. So I know when it gets to this mark, I must stop pressing the regulator up. It's no big deal if it's a millimeter or two off, because if it's too far up, the air pressure from when you fill the gun will push it down to where it needs to be. And if it's too far down, when you screw the cylinder back together, it'll go up to where it needs to be. But obviously if it's like a centimeter or so off, it's going to be a big problem. So this is tough, but I think we can do it. Okay. It shouldn't be too hard.
There we go.
There you go. And then when we screw it in, it'll go up to where it needs to be. It's probably about 1 or 2 millimeters down from where it needs to be. Once we screw the thing together, it'll come up to where it needs to be. Okay, so according to the instruction manual over here, you're supposed to hold the cylinder upwards with this piece at the bottom, and then once we screw it in, then it will all come together nicely. So I'm going to fit the spacer, hold the spacer right over there where it needs to be. I'm going to try and get it as central as possible. Okay. Last bit in, and the vent hole should line up more or less perfectly with the transfer port. There you go. So everything's put together. It's actually not as difficult as I thought it would be. So those of you who are considering getting a regulator for your gun, it's really not that bad. I know it's a scary task to undertake. I've been contemplating on and off for a few years now whether I should get a regulator for my gun or not. But I think once I can get everything going and once I've seen the results, I think it'll be well worth it. With the regulator installed in the air cylinder, the only thing left to do is to put the rifle back together again. Now I've done this so many times and I know exactly what I'm doing, but if you do need help with a step, I've got a 3-part series on air rifle maintenance on my channel that you can take a look at. This should help you out quite a bit. There you go. Now it's just a matter of taking this thing home, doing all the necessary chrony testing, all of that, and perhaps doing some fine tuning. But apart from that, we're pretty much done. Oh, I forgot how nice this gun felt to load. Oh, it's amazing. Okay, let's do it. Over the next few weeks, I'll be showing you how to test the regulator once you've installed it, and how to rebalance the valve and hammer system to get the exact results you're looking for. I'll also cover the advantages and disadvantages of installing a regulator and tell you why I think all PCP airguns should be regulated as standard. Subscribe to Air Arms Hunting South Africa to stay notified, and I'll catch you next time.